with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, May 6, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, some call it genocide by default. Republican plan for the pandemic pivots to let it ride. Meanwhile, mission accomplished. White House seeks to disband the coronavirus task force. Recently fired top U.S. vaccine official turns whistleblower on the White House crap show. And surprise, Kushner's kleptocrats behind government failure to secure safety equipment. Meanwhile, K Street seeks a bailout for lobbyists. The Supreme Court hears a case today to expand which employees can deny contraceptive coverage. Which employers can deny contraceptive coverage to their employees. Meanwhile, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they'll all be calling in. She'll be doing it, hopefully, as she's just getting out of the hospital. Meanwhile, good news. Latest polls show the Republicans in danger of a Senate loss, or I should say loss of the Senate. And meanwhile, Trump's re-election campaign looks as rife with corruption and grift as his administration. All this and more on today's program. In terms of that last one, I mean, it's good. You know, there is there's actually substantial political science research that shows that, in fact, when politicians make promises during their campaigns, they end up actually keeping them, more or less. And so it is nice that the grift that the president is running the country in that way is reflected in his political campaign. So that's good. Brad Parscale, his campaign manager, has gone from a guy who I think cut videos, literally like, with all due respect to Matthew Film Guy, to a guy who owns a $24 million house in a matter of a year or two. So it's pretty good work if you can get it, cutting that video. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Joining us today, Michael Brooks from his abode in... Look at that. Look at you. Like we're just watching, like you got a lot more art behind you now.
Yeah, reset the shot a little bit.
I see. You got it. You opened it up, or you're just actually doing some decorating?
A little bit A, a little bit of B.
All right, fair enough.
How you doing up there?
Oh well, I mean, you don't want to know. It's my situation is rather predictable, actually. It is like
what is the most stressful possible scenario?
It's not quite that as much as it is like if you were to try and predict how this scenario would go, the easiest answer, the most obvious answer is actually in this instance the correct one. There's no like, wow, that is a crazy story. No, it's like, that's a story exactly as how you would expect it to go.
So it's not like that's how Slate used to do their editorial. Like, this didn't go as expected.
Right.
Or the
it is
counter,
not,
yeah,
it
quite
is
the
not
opposite.
A contrarian piece.
Right.
No.
Right.
I will say this: we have a new sponsor. I don't even have the ad copy for it yet, but they have sent, samples of CBD, but the good stuff, the really good stuff. Like some of it, frankly, some of it looks like pot. I mean, I don't know why I have to whisper that. I guess maybe it's because of but I used the tincture last night, so I actually got the first good night's sleep I've had in about 3 or 4 weeks. We're gonna be advertising for these guys at Sunset Lake very soon, but they're out of Vermont. It's all organic. I mean, it's pretty awesome.
I need to try some of that.
Oh,
my sleep schedule is totally effed.
Oh, you do. Believe me. We will get into that, but today we're going to be talking. I mean, look, we are watching and I hope this is wrong, but it's sort of like, I mean, honestly, it is as if we were watching people being pushed off the side of a building in slow motion, and you're sitting there, you're watching the pushing, and you know that gravity exists, and you're still like, well, maybe there'll be a big gust of wind, or maybe, like the laws of physics will be suspended, but you know that that's not actually the case. And that's what we're watching right now as the administration promotes the loosening of the way that we have been organizing ourselves to deal with the coronavirus. There's 2 or 3 reasons why this is happening. They are all interrelated. One is the president wants to project that they've handled this, and he thinks that the deaths of 2,000 to 3,000 Americans for months is either something that people won't notice or won't be as relevant in the States. I mean, I'm convinced they've probably done a breakdown in in the White House, and they're looking at this and they're going like, okay, Georgia might be a problem, but not necessarily with our voters. And, Nebraska might be a problem, but not with our voters because they're not working in the meat processing plants. They just own the plants. I mean, I'm quite convinced that someone has come to him with this type of breakdown.
I doubt that for a second.
That it's like, it might be like 51-50, but it's like a toss up. But if we don't do this, we're definitely going to lose. So it's worth the try. And that's what they're doing. And I think that's what's happening in terms of like what is pushing the White House, because a lot of the states that are supportive of the president are far less dense. And obviously the stay-at-home orders are to create less density, right? I mean, at least in terms of like where people gather. In a micro level, the stay-at-home order is to create less density. And there are a lot of states where it's just not that dense. There are a lot of areas of the country where it's very rural. And that I think is the idea out of the White House. And then
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
In terms of the Republican states, I mean, all you need to do is look at Ohio for a perfect example of this. And, we've heard the governor of Iowa say something to this as well. But in Ohio, they have begun to loosen things. They have set up a website for employees to report on businesses who are not following the Ohio's, health guidelines or CDC health guidelines. No, that's not what it's for. It's a website where you can report COVID-19 quits or refusals of workers to work because it's too dangerous for them to work there, so that these people can be denied unemployment insurance efficiently. That's what's going on here. The moral hazard, and that's in quotes, of people deciding that in the midst of a pandemic, they don't feel comfortable risking their lives to work at the hair salon basically is driving, and it's not just the moral hazard, right? It's also they don't want to pay the unemployment.
Yeah.
And we should make it clear that DeWine now has announced today massive cuts to education and public services there, and is refusing to spend money from the rainy day fund. Contemplate this.
This would be a rainy day.
What else would be a rainy day except for we're in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic and receiving an unprecedented shock to our economy? No, because he wants the money there so that you don't have to justify, tax cuts for wealthy people. I mean, that's what's going on here. And,
look, there's an opportunity here and they see it very clearly for another, not only another concentration of wealth and resources, which we saw in the bailout, but another degrading of working standards generally. So, of course, I listened to Nouriel Roubini yesterday on Bloomberg, and, he was the guy who first got some recognition for predicting the recession. And the 2008 financial crisis. And he's predicting the worst of all worlds, because he's like, there's enough being injected into the economy that you could see basically like a stagflation with degraded work standards across the board.
And this is the point, we heard a lot about during the Democratic campaign about structural reform and people not wanting structural change. And, we're getting it.
Yeah,
what the Republicans are doing are creating structural changes to our economy and to our social safety net and to the way our society works. And supposedly, the Democrats are really going to hand it to them this time, but it could very well be late because too late, because I don't know what it is that the Democrats don't have the ability, it seems, to basically say Republicans own this, and therefore we're going to go for stuff that we think is unique in terms of what we would advocate for. They own this. Most of them believe you spend money, the government needs to spend money to hire people when they're in office, we should say. They don't believe it when a Democrat's in office, but when they're in office, they know the laws of economics, and that the Democrats should have been leveraging this throughout that period of time. The only thing that could save the Democrats, and frankly, the rest of us, is if things get so clearly bad enough and then the Democrats have the opportunity to leverage that. I don't know that they will do it at that time, but
that's how they always win. I keep repeating this, but they win in Republican abject, massive failure, or if they have an exceptionally charismatic figurehead on a presidential ticket.
Well, I'm not even talking about the election. I'm talking about the enormous amount of money that's going out the door and where.
I don't even.
I'm talking legislation.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. not to be too cynical, but we have to see. What's also disturbing to me is that you don't even have, like in the UK, you have a lot of people at least attempting to say, we want to keep doing this third way center left model. And here's what that looks like in 2020. I don't agree with those prescriptions at all, but you have a thought process going on. I don't see any thought process on any level. I don't see a thought process on how to hold Republicans accountable. I don't see an alternative to Sanders to a Sanders agenda. I basically see we'll build a little bit off of Obama, and then we'll keep our heads down. And
I just think it's completely let's just make sure that we're not part of this equation.
But of course they are.
Well, of course,
and that's that is an unhelpful contempt for the electorate in that case, because that's obvious to people.
we can talk about the election in a bit. I am talking about right now.
Do you think they'll get another bite at the apple, though?
What's that?
Do you think they'll get another bite at the apple legislatively?
Oh, I think it's impossible to imagine that there's not going to be another bailout. I mean,
sure. But
I think it's impossible to imagine.
But what would they have to do? I mean, just within the realm.
Need to go and they'll pass legislation in the House.
Right.
And what they need to do is go about 50% bigger on everything that they want. And they basically need to say, and maybe, if anything, shortchange the obvious stuff that everybody wants, so that the Senate has to force them to raise those numbers that everybody wants, and they get the numbers that they want, including, I would also put into that voter protection.
I would assume that enough. I mean, one is I do think, obviously Pelosi personally is not there on a lot of policy, but there must be, just looking at it, trying to come up with an actual reason here of how they've conducted themselves. There must be enough members of the Democratic House caucus that don't want those bigger, they don't want to do it. They don't want additional protections, additional funding. I mean,
I don't think there was the opportunity. I just don't think there was the opportunity to pass that bill. And I think that was a question of leadership. Yeah, because I think the House just, decided not to do it that way, to just cede to the Senate. And I suspect that's because Chuck Schumer is, beside himself with how well he thinks he did on remember, they were bragging, no money can go to the Trump family. Like, that's a big accomplishment. I mean, I don't know that we can tell what the dynamic is between those two. But I've been hearing reporting that Chuck Schumer was so satisfied with what happened with the CARES Act in the Senate that he put the kibosh on the House, bringing their own thing. Now, I think Nancy Pelosi was probably more than happy not to do much, but just a reminder, today's Majority Report is made possible in part by Skillshare. The first 500 people who go to skl.sh/Majority Report 8, Majority Report 8, are going to get a free premium membership to Skillshare for 2 entire months. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes on any topic you can imagine, classes that are taught by experts in their fields. They got classes on drawing. They got classes on ukulele. I know they got classes on ukulele. I am learning songs on the ukulele right now from Skillshare. They got classes in web design. They got classes in photography. They got classes in cooking. You want to learn how to make a great cup of coffee. You want to learn how to make sourdough bread, whatever it is. Running a small business analytics. I'm just going through all the stuff that I've been, how to learn, how to teach. That's some of that. I have yet to find the class to find Saul to stop screaming, but all the classes are less than an hour long. They split them up into chapters, essentially, bite-sized lessons. So it's easy to, if you've got kids who are hassling you, if you got a lot of stuff to do, you watch one, then you go deal with them. You watch another, you go deal with them. Everyone can benefit from learning a new skill, brushing up on something that you've been doing. Has classes for every skill level, so you can improve on stuff that you can learn new stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Membership to Skillshare is less than $10 a month. It gives you access to their entire library of classes. However, the first 500 people who go to skl.sh/Majority Report 8 are going to get a free membership for 2 whole months.
Go learn.
Put the link underneath this video. If you're watching on YouTube, it's in the podcast description if you are listening. Also, this ad is a warning. Our democracy is under attack from the U.S. Supreme Court in about 1 million different ways. In the middle of a deadly global pandemic, people across Wisconsin are planning on voting absentee to keep themselves and their families safe. They were planning, but on that night before the election, 5 Republican justices on the Supreme Court told thousands of people they would choose or have to choose between risking their lives and forfeiting their right to vote. This Supreme Court favoring Republican interests over our democracy is nothing new. They gutted the Voting Rights Act. They invited billionaires and corporations to spend unlimited amounts to trying to influence elections. They gave a green light to gerrymandering, voter ID laws, voter roll purges. And now a progressive movement is rising up to fight back, because it's quite possible the Wisconsin case won't be the last 2020 showdown over voting rights to be settled in the courts this year. We simply cannot trust this court to put aside partisan views and protect people's rights to vote. Our courts are becoming too political. It's time to say enough. Learn more about how you can join the fight by visiting demandjustice.org/majority. That's demandjustice.org/majority. Folks, head over there right now to check out this organization.
They were also the ones that sent the. Oh, go ahead. I don't.
Yes, the E.D. Brian Fallon was the one who sent the who filed the complaint that is going to the Supreme Court about the way that McConnell went around pressuring people about his protege being picked. They. I mean, there's a whole right now. The Supreme Court is deciding, can we let moral standards as opposed to religious standards justify an employer for not offering contraception through their healthcare plan? I mean, contemplate what that means. First off, a company has morals?
Really?
I think you would actually get in trouble from a fiduciary standpoint. If you were a public company and said, well, from a moral standpoint, we're not going to do X, Y, or Z. But put that aside. What does that even mean? How do we and then where does it stop? Well, you know what? I have a moral problem with two guys being married. They're not eligible for health care at all. His husband. Are you serious? I have a moral problem with that. In fact, I have a moral problem with people who game so much at home. Matt, I just think that's I think you're a moral degenerate for playing those violent games. And I understand that maybe some of you folks are smoking pot. I know it's legal, but I have a moral issue with it. That's what we're talking about. And, for once, there's an organization that is explicitly trying to shape the pool and the process of choosing judges for the next Democratic president. And Fallon some time ago said, there should be no corporate lawyers who get appointed judges, period, by the next Democratic administration. Super important. All right, let's go on to, so that's demandjustice.org/majority. Go check it out. So Donald Trump, really hard. I think everybody goes through this, Michael. I'm sure you do too. How do I prioritize what I got to do? How do I prioritize what I got to do? I want to golf, but then
they do at this point.
I got work, right? It's very difficult.
Yes.
And I think this is when we get to see Donald Trump at his most vulnerable and in many ways his most human. Just a lot of things on his plate, just some things he couldn't get to.
You're 3 years into your first term.
Yeah.
You're now applying for the job again. What did you do when you became president to restock those cupboards that you say were bare?
Well, I'll be honest, I have a lot of things going on. We had a lot of people that refused to allow the country to be successful. They wasted a lot of time on Russia. That turned out to be a total hoax. Then they did Ukraine, and that was a total hoax. Then they impeached the president of the United States for absolutely no reason. And we even had 197-0 vote by the Republicans.
Hey, Brendan, listen, I'm just let's just work this out here. We have the president comes into office. there's obviously an investigation that almost starts after that because he fires Comey. Now, Comey was not in charge of replenishing the personal protection stockpiles of the United States, was he?
In the broader sense, it's a team effort.
So, Comey, let me get this straight. You are the guy who buys all the N95 masks. Is that
right?
You're fired.
I'm very concerned about the supply chains. Now, get out of my face.
How many times, Brendan, did he play golf before the quarantine?
Trump has played golf 249 days while in office.
Okay. Now to be fair, that's over the course of 3 years.
Yes.
So 365 days. He didn't even play for a full year. So that's probably once every that's probably once every 4 days. Like Monday you play, Friday you play. Then you play Tuesday, then you play Saturday. Then you play
because self-care is part of it.
Yeah, because self-care is part of it. Elizabeth Warren and I talked about that.
N95? Well, wait a second.
I mean, it really reminds me of there's so many similarities between Trump and Bush, actually. And except, they wouldn't present it obviously in the same crazy narcissistic way in public. But
right.
I do remember the story of the intelligence briefing before 9/11, and Bush telling the briefers, specifically was a briefing that was highly they're going to use planes. It's going to not
the
a
August 6 PDB. Bin Laden determined to attack America.
Right. And with very specific, not just the sort of hey, Bin Laden's out there, he's a bad guy. Very specific, detailed warnings, unusually good intelligence, it seems to me, from my reading on that area. And Bush said, you guys covered your asses.
Right.
And then he went out and golfed.
Yep.
And I guess the only difference, the difference is that Trump would say well, I couldn't focus on 9/11 because these intelligence briefers were constantly bothering me. I couldn't focus.
Russia. Every time I look at it, you see Russia.
Bin Laden, Bin Laden, Bin Laden.
What would be nice if David Muir was willing to sacrifice his access and go wait, really? Seriously? No, seriously, Mr. President. Seriously. You had a lot of things going on? Why did you fire your pandemic response team? You had the time to get rid of that position. And the thing that I'm honestly these are all Republican decisions. And there is a complete, understandably, tendency to focus on Trump. But Donald Trump did not. There's no way in the world that Donald Trump was even aware that there was a pandemic response.
Well, that comes from Bolton.
Yeah.
That comes from Bolton.
Pence.
And right. And and they've always, that's always on the chopping block. I would be shocked, and I am definitely not going to go through the C-SPAN archive to find this, if at CPAC or some other similar gathering, the fact that the Obama administration was so wasteful and effete that there was a pandemic preparedness team at the National Security Council wasn't a throwaway applause line of look at how stupid and self-indulgent.
They're doing experiments on bats.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously?
I don't know about you, but I want a little bit more national security, a little bit less nurses on my national security team.
Steve Bannon said explicitly, our job is to deconstruct the administrative state. Well, guess what? The absence of all the stuff that we want to happen now, guess what that is? That's the administrative state.
That's right.
Here is Donald Trump talking about essentially opening up. There has been what are the broad principles that as we open up that we should be following? What are the one thing that you should not do, and what is the one thing that you can do? We don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say
we don't know because there has been no.
The principle is we should not open up yet. I mean, like, we can't in any systemic way. We need to take care of people.
Here is Donald Trump, clip number 2, saying we just got to do it. Just got to rip the Band-Aid off.
On the IHME model, which is now showing 134,000 deaths by August, doubling its previous prediction, are you concerned that that's happening because some of these states are relaxing guidelines too early?
No, I'm not, because that assumes no mitigation. And we're going to have mitigation. No, we're letting people out. But the fact that we're letting people go and go to their jobs, they have to do it. You know, if they held people any longer with the shutdowns, and you're going to lose people that way too, and you already have, I'm sure. But between drug abuse and, I mean, they say suicide, a lot of different things. There's no win, just so you know. There's no great win one way or the other, but I'll tell you where there is a win. We're going to build a country. I did it once. 2 months ago, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world, the best employment numbers we've ever had in history, right? I mean, everybody agrees. Even CNN agrees with that one. But I will say this, we're going to do it again, and that's what we're starting. And I view these last couple of days as the beginning. We're going to build the greatest economy in the world again, and it's going to happen pretty fast.
If the model is correct, though, is it acceptable now?
A ventilator in every pot. We're going to build it. We're going to build it over again. We're just going to get it. There's no win. And so, you know, there's a lot of people committing suicide right now that, and look, I mean, there are a lot of people who are at home who have a harder time dealing with this for a myriad of reasons than others. But having people die around them because we're going out there and just hopefully being able to keep it under 3,000 a day. That's the game plan, trying to keep the deaths under 3,000 a day. And he's talking about that new, you know, the Washington model said 60,000 people dying. We are now, I think, what are we at now today? 75,000?
I think we're at, I thought it had cracked 80, but I could be wrong.
By August, I got news for you folks. We're going to be ahead of 135 as well.
We need to just keep reviewing this dynamic, and it's always the same point, but it just needs to get hammered again and again and again, though, which is that there has not been a proper social provision for people to stay home, and that is going to feed the dynamic of all of the other horrific consequences of a Great Depression in economic terms. People are going to, you know, have higher incidence of anxiety, depression, mental health, domestic abuse is skyrocketing. There's all sorts of horrific social consequences to this, all of which could be ameliorated by the obvious and basic steps that don't happen. Giving everybody, getting rid of rent, giving people money. I was actually read something that is so disturbing to me because I was reading and it was fascinating. The state of Kerala in India has been very successful in how they've dealt with this, and they have a very long-standing social infrastructure. Basically, they have a long democratic communist state government there, basically. And they have mobilized labor unions and youth groups and all sorts of other social organizations to deliver food to people. And even the governor of the province said, we're physically distancing, but we're socially connected. And that's going to build the base of how we deliver people their needs. And they haven't done a UBI, and because they were concerned about the effect of price inflation with a UBI on food and other essentials. Right. And it was a compelling argument. And the thing was like, the United States doesn't even really have the social infrastructure that this place does yet to work around not having something like UBI. And I mean, anyways, the point is that as long as people don't have the necessities delivered to them, there will be a horrifying consequence to staying in quarantine, and the Republicans will be able to exploit it. And he's going to, and what I am also, the second point that is
Well, wait, no, hold on. No,
Yeah.
I don't think we're at that point yet, frankly. I mean,
Which
you
point?
look at the polling, 70 to 80% of the people want to stay home.
Absolutely.
And even
Absolutely.
60% of Republicans. And I think what we're seeing is we're seeing more rural states, and we're seeing states where, frankly, there are people who have been watching television. I mean, look, nobody to find people in New York. Like, I wonder what the polling is in New York, right? I mean, if you look at,
I would imagine it's higher than the national number.
But if you look at like the city, and if you were look even like within a 2 to 3 hour radius of New York, because of the connections that people have to the city, the level in which they take it, how seriously they take this, is much higher. And
Much higher.
And I can understand in the context of like you're out in North Dakota and you're thinking, what, like,
well, that's the thing that's the thing I'd wonder about, is getting into that. That's another one. I wonder how targeted they're looking at those, because the overall national numbers are very clear. People want to stay in quarantine.
I would bet.
But when you go, and I'm wondering though, when you get into different swing states, different people they need to mobilize, different geographies, I don't know. I think most people do want to stay home, period. But I also think that I mean, just bluntly, it gives them the talking points. What I wonder from their perspective, I get that Trump is just anxious and freaked out, and he loves to brag about the economy, and he can't brag about the economy. But like, this isn't gonna work. That's the thing. Is like, they force things open. This is going to spike the crisis. It's going to freak people out. People's social behaviors have already radically changed in terms of even going back to places that are prematurely reopened. I don't like there isn't going to be, oh my God, we're out again. Let's go to the restaurant. Let's go to the gym. Like, that's not happening. And that relates to the numbers that you pointed out earlier. Most people want to be in quarantine, and most people take this really seriously. So there isn't going to be this magical outpouring of folks.
No,
thankfully.
I think I would be shocked if this actually increases the economic activity to the extent that they think it will. But again, there's also areas of the country where they do not take this seriously at all. Right. They have been bathing in Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson. We're all saying, like, there's no evidence that says that staying at home works. And they're all just assuming that it's going to be fine when they go out. And I mean, maybe, again, it's like, I don't know, I could drop this pen and, like, if I do it 100 times, maybe on the 99th time it'll float. I mean, I don't know, but the physics of this have not changed. There's no reason to believe, like, the virus is not less around. It is not less fatal. It is not less, nothing has diminished about the virus. Even our knowledge base has not grown as much as one would hope in terms about it. The only things that have changed is that in some areas of the country, we have more people wearing masks, which is definitely helpful. In some areas of the country,
also undermined by the same, by Mike Pence not wearing a mask. So even to the extent that that is true, and we can start to normalize certain things if we take precautions, those precautions are undermined by the same people who are saying, let's just open it up.
Yep. Here's Donald Trump. Let's play that clip. Here's one. We have two more. Or actually, no, here it is. Let's go. Let's play number 5. This
Trump
is
heavy day.
Listen, guys, we're warriors. We're all warriors. This is it. This is like the most reminiscent when we got attacked on 9/11. One of the things that George Bush was saying, that to preserve the American way, we need to go out and shop. You need to go out and shop, everybody. Get out there and shop. And in some way, this is what Donald Trump wants us to look inside ourselves and see ourselves as warriors. Go get the disease. You can't be touched.
I just want to finish a follow-up. If I understand you don't want to keep the country closed for 5 years, but don't you want your advisors to keep looking at this closely the way you have?
They are looking at it very closely. They are looking at it very closely. And I just said it today. I used the word for the first time, I think, in terms of what we're doing. I'm viewing our great citizens of this country, to a certain extent and to a large extent, as warriors. They're warriors. We can't keep our country closed. We have to open our country. Somebody said, oh, we could keep it for the next 18 months. We could keep it for the next 2 years. Doug Ducey's done an incredible job as the governor of Arizona. The people aren't going to accept it. They won't accept it, and they shouldn't accept it. We have a great country. We can't keep it closed. I mean, I've had doctors say, well, why don't we close it for a couple of years? This is the United States of America. I created, with a lot of other very talented people and the people of our country, the greatest economy in the history of the world, the greatest that we've ever had, the greatest employment numbers, the best numbers we've ever had, the best stock markets. I think we had 144 days of record stock markets. And then one day they said, we have to close our country. Well, now it's time to open it up. And you know what? The people of our country are warriors, and I'm looking at it. I'm not saying anything is perfect. And yes, will some people be affected? Yes. Will some people be affected badly? Yes. But we have to get our country open, and we have to get it open soon. Maybe I could ask Doug if you'd like to.
Yeah. You know what I'm just struck by is and I guess this shouldn't be a surprise in terms of, and I think this sort of is in some respects an American affliction, but he really does feel like he's been cheated.
Oh yeah.
Like it is not fair.
Totally unfair.
I did everything right.
Yep.
And then China did it to me. The Democrats did it to me. They brought the corona. And that's not fair. So we're opening up. Doesn't count. This doesn't exist. We just as like there's just no I mean, honestly, it's like it's reminiscent of like a 7-year-old. It's just like, but you told me we could watch a movie, but I'm sorry, the power's out. The TV doesn't work. But you said I could watch a movie. I know, but the power is out and we can't turn the TV on. But you said, well, yes, I know. I mean, that's
power.
Honestly,
you're having power problems up there.
It happens.
Oh, damn.
But that is.
I knew that was plucked from the.
Oh yeah, no.
Real life.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So no, I mean, I think that's of course.
Same exact attitude.
Of course. And I also, look, even in the most resilient of economies that had all the things that I want an economy to have, obviously a pandemic would affect it very negatively. But I have to say, the idea that this economy is so great and so robust and so incredible, and jobs that are already completely underpaid, undervalued, and disrespected, that don't have any protection built into them, could be shed by tens of millions in a matter of weeks. I don't know if that's not the robust economy I'd want to go into the future with, no matter what the stock market was doing. And by the way, the stock market is not necessarily doing bad. It's been all over the place. I mean, this is another horrifying proof that the stock market can do just great. I read an analysis last week in the Financial Times. And you could tell some of these traders were very intrigued. They were like, we can have this level of unemployment and this level of stock performance. That's very interesting.
Well, that is a function of $4 trillion.
Yeah, of course.
Being pumped into.
Of course.
I mean, that is the, I think in 6 to 12 months, we're going to look back on this time and we're going to see, it's almost as if there has been, an embalming fluid put into the body of our economy at this point. And so it's stiff and it can, the body can stand up and it's rigid. It hasn't collapsed, but that's because it has been the essentially just one element of it has been pumped in. There's two implications of that. One is, again, and we said this, when we were talking about the CARES 1 or CARES 2 in the first place. Everybody's on a yellow flag going around the track, and one small segment of the people in our society have been basically said, you got the green flag, you can go full speed, because they're getting trillions of dollars of free money that they're borrowing now, and they're just essentially buying all the assets, distressed assets they can, and they're all flush with cash. At one point, it's quite possible that maybe it never catches up to them. At one point, the real question is going to be, once we get out of this sort of state of shock that we're in right now, and people start to realize, like, we're still within the window of the 10 weeks of like small businesses having essentially loans or grants to pay their payroll. But the 10 weeks runs out in mid-June, and then there's nothing. And we're going to start to see the impact of the unemployment money not getting there. And we're going to start to see the impact of people saying, here's Dennis Prager basically just laying out what all the Republican governors are basically either maybe saying, or maybe just sort of implying, or maybe just hinting at, but this is their agenda. Here's Dennis Prager basically laying it all out for everybody in the positive. It's everything we've been saying.
The Rosa Parks
for him
of our time.
In the positive. Number 9.
Anyway, this was the issue here. U.S. businesses fear a wave of litigation as workers in meat processing facilities, grocery stores, and other locations get sick or die from the COVID-19 illness caused by the new coronavirus. I'm just curious, in America, do you not have the
They must be signing up with my video. Hold on 1 second.
This guy is the most incredible bagman for these people.
Well, he's giving away the game a little bit here. Look, and we all know.
I think they've been giving away the game for a while. It's amazing how blunt they've been. Going back to the frigging lieutenant governor of Texas.
Yep.
And I think he was a little premature. It's probably not right in the beginning couple of weeks of absolute shock and horror to say, hey, it's time to start thinking about killing people's grandparents. But now we're right on time.
Workers in meat processing facilities, grocery stores, and other locations get sick or die from the COVID-19 illness caused by the new coronavirus. I'm just curious, in America, do you not have the...
Oh my God. Shit. Sorry.
Can you play it from the browser?
While you're looking at it, I haven't seen this clip yet, but I'm guessing in America, do you not have the right to work? In America, do you not have the right to provide for your family?
Am I not allowed to go bungee cord jumping?
Right.
Well, are people going to stop me from bungee cord jumping? That can be dangerous.
I want to skydive during Corona. This isn't Nazi Germany.
Remember, here's the dynamic, right? They open up, and that when you open up the state, that means that if you don't show up at work, you don't get unemployment. You're afraid of working at the hair salon? Sorry. You don't show up, you don't get unemployment. Go ahead.
Get sick or die from the COVID-19 illness caused by the new coronavirus. I'm just curious, in America, do you not have the right to quit your job? Can somebody explain why?
Pause it. Okay, here we're going. Now, this is classic libertarian, right? Like, no one's forcing you to work. You just make a decision. I need to eat, and I have weighed out, do I want to eat? Do I want to pay for rent? Do I want to pay my mortgage? Do I want to buy groceries? Do I want to, have electricity on at my house? Do I want to get my kid something for their birthday? And you're just making a determination. And in this instance, it's not just do I want to bag groceries for that ability? Or do I want to, cut hair for that ability? Or do I want to work at the cafe for that ability? Or do I want to work construction for that ability? Now it's just the calculation is, do I want to do those things plus risk my life or getting seriously ill for 3 or 4 weeks? I don't have sick pay. And he's just saying, like, it's your choice. It's your choice. This is the classic libertarian theory here, that there is no such thing as economic coercion, that coercion can only happen at the butt of a gun, but it cannot happen when it's like your kid's health is in stake. Your health is at stake. Your ability to eat, your ability to sleep somewhere. That doesn't exist in the minds of libertarians.
It's a quote that I'll butcher, but it's something to the effect of the market in all of its infinite wisdom. Basically, the rich man and the poor man are both equally free to sleep under a bridge.
Right.
Exactly.
They're not equally free to sleep in the castle, though.
They are certainly not equally free to sleep, or they're not equally free to sit in what appears to be some type of quarantine studio.
Oh,
and bloviate about how people should have the capacity, if they so choose, to risk getting a deadly virus because it's so urgently necessary that people get tats again right now.
Just remind me again, do people have a right to quit their job? Go ahead. What a smug ass.
An employer can be sued if you contract COVID-19 there? What if you contracted the regular flu and died, as tens upon tens of thousands do every year? What if you got that at work? This is, I'm telling you, you're watching your country ruined by the left. I mean, tell me why this is not an example. Tell me what the moral legitimacy is of being able to sue a company, and it'll put it out of business. I mean, it's obvious. These lawsuits are huge.
All right, I'll tell you what it is, what the moral legitimacy is. There is a concept in the law of negligence. We have made it the law in this country that you have a responsibility to provide a safe environment for people to work at. You must do what is reasonable. There is a reasonable standard. Are you reasonably aware of the threat? Are you taking reasonable measures to mitigate that threat? So in other words, I call my workers into work at my store. How can I reasonably mitigate the threat? Well, I'm sure people have been to places where you see plexiglass in front of the clerk so that they can't breathe directly on you. Maybe I turn off the air conditioning and bring in only fans. Maybe I keep the doors open. Maybe I make sure that everybody has a mask when they come into work, and I don't let customers in unless they have a mask. But if I'm an employer who doesn't want to have to deal with certain employees, I can just say, like, I'm not doing that. And then that person has to decide, like, well, am I going to go into that unsafe work environment? There's nobody to protect me. There's no OSHA coming anymore. And I have to choose between going in there and getting paid or losing unemployment insurance. That's why we need protections for workers. And when OSHA doesn't work, then we have civil liability that exists. And that's why Mitch McConnell, their Mangio line or whatever it is we want to make sure that there's no liability for corporations and for entities in this situation. We want to give them blanket immunity. And that's what's going on here. It's as simple as that. All right, let's take a break, head into the fun half of the program. A reminder, folks, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. Don't forget, sign up for the AM Quickie. The AM Quickie has also moved to our other YouTube channel, youtube.com/Majority Report Audio. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Michael, last night was Tuesday. What happened on TMS?
Talked with Torrey Reed, who wrote this book, Toward Freedom. Actually, Sam, I'd recommend, I think you might really enjoy him.
Is University of Illinois?
Exactly.
That's right.
Yep. Really, really fascinating book on the New Deal. We talked about and Black labor and civil rights. We talked about the Moynihan Report. Doris Polo, she joined us from Ecuador. We talked about the mercenaries in Venezuela, the political conflicts inside the Caribbean itself, and how they're trying to maintain independence from the United States, even as the United States is stealing ventilators. This is a way in which this is the way in which, by the way, they're evoking. This is how they're evoking. You know, when people say, "Well, that's a populist move," this is how they're invoking the Defense Production Act to make sure ventilators don't get to Barbados or Jamaica.
Right, so they can actually intercept stuff rather
Exactly.
than force corporations to produce stuff at a reasonable price.
Exactly. Well, including, I mean, even one case, the one in Barbados wasn't even like, it wasn't even a purchase. It was actually a charitable donation to the state from an individual wealthy donor that was redirected. So we talked about that in CARICOM. I talked about the what's driving this new Cold War with China. And I looked specifically at the competition between China and the United States in the international arms market, which is something that people should brush up on. And we did a whole bunch of other stuff in the post game, a lot of stuff on the show, patreon.com/TMBS. Thursday, Daniel Besser and I are streaming. Sunday, Pepe Escobar and I are streaming. And go to Red Emma's and get Against the Web.
Go to where?
Red Emma's is a worker-owned bookstore in Baltimore, and Cullen, he's been in studio. You met him.
Can you? Is there a website?
I think it is. You know, I don't know the name of the website off.
How are people gonna? Everybody's gonna go to Baltimore during the shutdown?
No. That you can order it online.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, I understand what I'm trying to think though. What is the name of the web? I think it's Red Emma's. Is it on the blog, Brendan? I'm not sure. I'll get back on it. What?
Link will be in the description.
And what's
my
cool?
question is, what happened?
RedEmmas.org. It's RedEmmas.org.
What is the? Is there an assessment on what that crew of people who went down to Venezuela? It's sort of like a really like a Trump version of Bay of Pigs on some.
It is like a Trump version of Bay of Pigs. It's, I mean, you know, it's we'll see. Right? I mean, Trump denies that he knows anything about this. I think there's photos. I mean, at the very least, some people involved in this company have done some security at Trump events.
The owner.
Yeah.
Also, oh, my cats.
And they're involved in rail. And this also might connect to a long form piece we did last year on, it was a different company, but there was a bunch of guys arrested at a bank in Haiti. And they were basically there to take like $1 billion out of a Haitian bank. Long story short, they got arrested by local police because they got pulled over in a car that had drones and machine guns in it. And they ended up getting sent back to Florida. And the Trump administration was like, we're going to investigate this. This looks sketchy, but just send them home. And then they got like, you and I have probably spent more time in an airport getting questioned after like a Caribbean vacation than these guys did. And then they were back at it. So,
but part of the responsibility for that is everybody who gave Guaido a standing ovation.
That's right.
Because that's definitely played into those guys' value calculation. Like, who knows how much official okay they had.
Right.
But if it worked, all those people would have supported it.
Well, the guy,
Absolutely.
from what I've read, the guy was promised from Guaido or Guaido affiliated people at least $1.5 million down payment to start. And they didn't get it. And they still did it because they're freedom fighters. And they must have thought like, we're going to get paid off from this.
Yeah.
They thought it was going to be a serious payday. And you're absolutely right. And it's standing ovations in the United States. Guaido was just in Europe. He's been in Canada.
Missed it by that much. I saw the boat and I thought you guys really had a chance.
I'm just excited for the Oliver Stone adaptation and the return of, our favorite actors.
I am all about Oliver Stone making a movie about this.
As a Mar-a-Lago.
Oliver Stone is right about this. Oliver Stone is very much right about this stuff.
Check out the No McKee Show. You can find it at patreon.com/the No McKee Show, and also a No McKee Const on YouTube, and the Antifada. Find it at patreon.com/the Antifada. Matt, what's happening on Literary Hangover?
Literary Hangover is being very active on twitch.tv now. So twitch.tv/literary hangover. We're going to do some Half-Life in 1984 maybe tonight. Also playing Kingdom Come Deliverance, and listen to Karl Kautsky on the Middle Ages. So a lot of deep stuff going on there. So that's what I want everyone to do. Follow the twitch.tv/literary hangover.
I'm sort of shocked that you haven't been kicked out of that apartment yet, but all right, folks.
Jesus Christ.
I'm just so jealous, frankly. See you in the fun half. What? Jamie may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
let's go to the phones.
Wonder what that guy's up to.
Which guy?
If we have another day of quarantine,
right.
we'll all be forced to be
That actually is
bisexual.
worth probably looking up. Call from 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 818.
You, sir, are a pretender.
All right. me try it again. I don't know what's going on.
Nice new sound effects.
Hello, hello.
818. Who's this?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Can you hear me, Mike?
Yes. Who's this?
Hey.
Oh, perfect. Whew. Oh, Dave from Jamaica. How you guys doing?
Dave from Jamaica. How are you, Dave?
Not too bad. I know I'm not supposed to start interpersonal drama, but I was reading up some reviews for Michael's book.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam, you seem to have left a not very good review. What's up with that?
Is that right?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked because I usually do my reviews before I buy, and it says
Where
Sam
was the
Cedar.
I couldn't believe that you, at a time when we're supposed to be boycotting Amazon.
Where is it? On Amazon?
Yes.
Is it a verified purchase?
Is it a
I don't
verified
know, but it
purchase,
says
Dave?
Sam Cedar, 1 star. That's good enough for me.
You know what the problem was though, because I was ready to break quarantine and go upstate and threaten Sam's life when I first saw 1 star.
I did
But
not see that.
the problem is that the review written by Sam Cedar, and maybe this is deep jujitsu, if I recall correctly, like bitches and moans about me being like personally dismissive of the people I'm writing about. That is not on brand for Sam at all.
Where is the review? Hold on.
It's not a serious reader. That's the best 1 star review.
Yeah, I like that one. The
That's a
respectful reader
fantastic
had me
review.
chuckling.
That's a fantastic review.
I don't see it.
You don't see? I see. May 4th, Sam Cedar.
Well, there's a lot of reviews. There's you gotta weed through all of the 5-star ones, Sam.
I'm just searching Sam Cedar. I don't see it.
Let me see if I can find it. I'll read it if I can find it. Hold on.
Not a verified purchase. Oh wait, Brendan had it.
Okay, yeah.
Yes,
This book.
unverified purchase.
This book represents a cynical, spiteful version of the left that needs to stop. The mocking of individuals and only try to build openness in a poor political environment only adds to the mess and pushes people away from your ideas. This is the most anti-Sam. I'm more sympathetic to those sentiments than Sam is. Directly to the author. Stop attacking people. You understand that you're not the smartest person in the room. Sam could have written that. And speak with people outside your social circle. No. Maybe you'll realize that petty attacks aren't how you grow a movement. So that's almost 99% not Sam.
I did not. I want to make this clear. I did not write that. I dictated that.
Where do you get the balls?
I dictated that.
Wait, who typed it?
Dave, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Is that going to prevent me from writing another review? Appreciate the call.
Dave, so actually I have a question. So Dave, there's no way of getting, you got to get this book through Amazon if you're in Jamaica?
No, I have ways.
Okay, that's no judgment. I don't care. I just, people have been asking me, so I'm just curious. Okay, cool.
I'll have one more question before I go. I don't want to tap the line too much. So I did see the Michael Moore documentary, and while I agree with certain points of it, the subtle overpopulation stuff really is unnerving. And like when I see discussion about it, it does get me unnerved because I do see people beginning to latch on to that nihilism, like, oh, it's all over. So I know you guys are looking into that, but that does concern me. But other than that, you guys stay safe.
Appreciate the call, Dave.
I don't like any population arguments. I think that, and in general, I do think that there can be a tendency on all sides of political debate to get too dogmatic, to not be able to deal with ideas in their own terms to some extent. I think there's some truth to that. But population-based arguments, and I'm not saying them, I'm not sure because I haven't seen all of the movie. I actually started it, but I haven't finished it, so I won't comment on how the movie handles it. Although I've seen a lot of people kind of zero in on that angle, and I think a population focus is innately negative, dangerous, inseparable from a racist context. And even if you're concerned about population as such, it's clear that that shouldn't be your base of how to look at things. And if population growth does tend to decrease with heightened living standards. So, make that your focus. It is a creepy and disturbing focus, particularly when, there's higher population rates in developing parts of the world that you're talking about individual consumers who cause infinitely less of an environmental impact than people in developed countries. And two, it's inseparable from a much kind of darker, ugly history. The other part of the movie, which I'm trying to look into, is the debate on renewables. And I've heard that some people say that the critiques are right if you were making it 10 years ago, but that the technologies have gotten a lot more efficient and productive in the last 10 years.
I haven't seen it. I am aware of that debate about how ready we are for renewables. And my sense is that the technology has increased significantly in the past 5 or 6 years. But let's go to the phones calling from a 240 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. This is Brianna from Bowling Green, Virginia.
Brianna from Bowling Green, Virginia. Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Well, hi, everyone. Hi, Michael. I'm a big fan of yours. Love your stuff.
Thank you.
I just want to ask, and I've been contemplating this for the last couple weeks, what's the Democrats' battle game here against Trump?
What's the what? The
Democrats.
Democrats.
The plan, the strategy to take on Trump.
You mean in the election?
And in the election, just in Congress in general, because they haven't done anything since they passed the first stimulus package.
Well,
so should they be in Congress fighting right now? What's going on? Because I don't think that's going to help if they're not fighting right now. In the Congress, I don't think that's going to help them, paint them in a positive light.
Well,
for the electorate come November, right?
Well,
right.
Well, I mean, right now they're not there. I think they should be back in session. But my understanding is, and we will see, and I don't know that they'll have the leverage, but my understanding is that Pelosi is now going to pass a bill in the House, initiate the bill in the House, and it's going to include state municipal funding. It's going to include safe voting. It's going to include expanded unemployment and food stamps. I don't know if there's going to be any type of cash payments, though I think there should be. I don't know anything about rent abatement or we already have 3 months worth of mortgage forbearance going on right now. I don't know if there's going to be more of that. So they're supposedly doing that. I mean, from an election standpoint, and right now their strategy is to make it a referendum on Trump. And I think this far out, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the polling is actually better right now for Biden than it was for Clinton at this time. But I don't know the value of that, but that's just the reality. We talked about this poll yesterday, which showed that even after being shown the Reid allegations and Biden's response, that only 14% of Democrats said absolutely shouldn't be the nominee, which is not that high when you're talking about April again. And I got polling right here. I mean, look, I am with you on this, both from a legislative and from a political standpoint. But their hair's not on fire because there's now polls that show Senate polls that show that I mean, listen to this Senate polling, and I appreciate the call, Brianna. I mean, I agree with you.
Can I just add? I want to just
think
add real quick to her, and then please we'll get to the polling. I think that they basically, I think they want to just, what Sam said essentially. They just want to kind of sit back and win without any real particular agenda of their own. I think, you know, and look, to be clear, this has been the Biden campaign since the announcement. We're going to return to normal. We're going to stop having a daily drama show and embarrassment. So it fits with the campaign strategy of Biden and most of the Democratic Party. And look, I think before this crisis, I think it was, I do not think it would have defeated Trump. I think now the trends are as they are, it absolutely could beat Trump. And that's going to be very, you know, that's among all of the difficulties of a Biden presidency. Which of course I hope Trump loses, will be that there isn't even going to be much of an agenda, frankly, to quote unquote hold him accountable around, because it really isn't a policy agenda. And from the inception, it consciously has not been a policy agenda.
Right.
Like I say, this guy is trash. Let's get rid of him. That's increasingly likely.
Right. They want to make a referendum on Trump. I mean, it is, you know, it's, understandable on some level, but and it may very well work in this situation. We could be, you know, who knows what the state of the country is going to be in September. It's not going to be, I can tell you this, none of this is going to go away. None of it is going to go away. And it may be the same, but it ain't going to be much better. It could be a lot worse. But here is let me go through these polls here. These are polls released yesterday. Steve Bullock, Montana governor, leading the incumbent Senator Steve Daines, Republican, by 7 points. Not a huge sample size, but not a huge state either. North Carolina Democratic candidate Cal Cunningham beating Republican Tom Tillis by 9 points. Democratic frontrunner Mark Kelly in Arizona leading Republican Senator Martha McSally by 8 points. I don't think that primary has happened yet. None of these, going forward, none of these are primaries have happened. Democratic frontrunner Barbara Boiler in Kansas, leading possible Republican nominee Chris Kobach by 2 points. In Maine, Sarah Gideon, Democrat, 2.5 point lead over Republican Senator Susan Collins. Joni Ernst leads possible challenger Teresa Greenfield only by a point. And I should also say that in that race, showing that Joni Ernst weakness, there is a more progressive candidate, Kimberly Graham.
She's good.
You could check out her website. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but she could use the help. Progressive candidates, insurgent candidates have a tougher time in this environment for both practical and I think sort of emotional reasons, as it were. But when you look at that polling, Democrats, remember, if Joe Biden wins, they need to win 4. That's assuming Doug Jones loses. Democrats, if Joe Biden doesn't win, it's unlikely you can take the Senate without Joe Biden.
I'm just looking
at
2016
was the first election in maybe a century where the state where the presidential candidate won, the Democrat or the corresponding senator won. And that's the first time that's happened in every state in over a century. So there's that.
So this, there was a piece in the Hill, and this is a couple of days ago. So, but on the 4th, but a Suffolk national poll that matters less, but a 10-point lead with Biden over Trump. That's, I mean, once you start getting to double digits, but more relevantly, and these are all still very, you know, they're all within play, but Biden leading Trump by more than 3 points, according to a Real Clear Politics average, in Wisconsin, Florida, Michigan, Arizona, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. If that's even remotely true, including Florida in that,
you're looking like a 360
that's
electoral vote win.
Yeah.
I mean, that's yes.
That's a blowout.
But we'll see. I mean,
we'll see. Well, we'll see if we even have an election.
Yeah,
I mean, like no doubt.
I am just as confident in these numbers as I am in the potential of the aliens landing in August, coming to get us, being fended off by our then nominee, Oprah Winfrey, and her team of trained murder hornets, who and once she defeats them, then it's a landslide election because she's responsible for funding up the alien invasion.
If we do get visited by some type of advanced, intergalactic species, the whole fucking Trump, Bolsonaro, these guys are not helping our case. When they come and review us for a couple of weeks of like, you either will join us in the Federation of Peace, or we're going to blow up all of you with a laser beam in a matter of seconds.
I think a lot of people would choose, like, let's just do the laser beam thing.
Yeah, right.
Let's just do that.
We'll either cure you of all known pandemics and diseases, and you'll join us in a international, intergalactic utopia, or who is this Jair Bolsonaro? We're going to kill every single one of you.
So Greg Gutfield has been retweeted by Donald Trump many times the other day. Apparently, like he did it. He was bragging of it. He did it like 8 times. Didn't like Gutfield also like win a Pulitzer? Or no, I'm confused. And so Greg Gutfield, here he is on Fox's The Five. He's really turning on the juice these days, Gutfield. He's really energized by being able to work from home, I think.
That Adam Schiff has re-entered the picture.
Yeah, it will never go away. But I want to talk about Schiff. But the first thing I want to bring up is that question in the presser from a reporter named Jim. I'm not sure which Jim it was, and he said, when Trump was painting an optimistic picture, he said, "Mission accomplished." And that was a gotcha question. Yeah. For those of you too young to remember, it was him trying to pull him into a Katrina moment. And it was just a snide little thing. He was like throwing a little pothole ahead of him. And we caught it. Also, the agreed narrative of all the media is, are you going to stop listening to the experts? As if he hadn't. Like, he'd been listening to the experts since day one. And it adjusted what he was doing every time he listened to them.
I thought he was about to throw an accidental pothole on himself by saying that he hasn't been listening to the experts ever. So how would this change?
Never. But Greg is, I think, is just trying to pretend that he's younger than he is, because in fact, the mission accomplished was George Bush landing on a air cruiser and sitting on the flight deck and in front of a banner saying mission accomplished about 6 months into the Iraq war. And it turned out that he was only about, 18 years off from that mission, I guess, being accomplished. But really, it depends on how specific you want to be about what he was claiming was accomplished, because they were very successful in convincing the body politic in America to invade a country that had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11 and the one that would be a total crap show, but would, I guess, be, have
a lot of contracts were awarded. I mean,
a lot of people made a lot of money.
A lot of people made a lot of money.
I think from Dick Cheney's perspective, it's still mission accomplished.
Absolutely.
And we are still paying the price for that. But yes, the idea that Donald Trump has been listening to the experts, I don't know. Maybe just look at today's 87-page report by a whistleblower from somebody who was fired from essentially the primary BARDA, which is the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority, where essentially the guy in charge of vaccinations in the country was fired because he kept pumping the brakes on this, on the president's pushing of hydroxychloroquine. or queen. And so they fired him. And he also reveals in his 87-page report that there were multiple opportunities to get N95 masks. He was sending emails around weeks before. For 5 weeks. HHS leadership failed to heed the warnings. The country was facing a massive shortage of protective equipment for healthcare workers. In that time, a major U.S. manufacturer contacted Bright. This is the guy, Rick Bright from BARDA. And a major manufacturer contacted Bright, offering to activate mothballed production lines. Bright could not get traction with superiors to fund the effort. The complaint states, instead, sensing no urgency from the U.S. prestige Ameritech, this is the company, proceeded to export 1 million masks to China. This is according to the complaint. There were also multiple opportunities, situations where he was forced to buy stuff that was completely unnecessary, to buy a failed flu remedy. I mean, on and on and on. So on both those accords, I give Greg Gutfeld a big fat 0 ranking.
He threw a pothole ahead of himself for the clip on the Majority Report.
Indeed.
I can't get over that image.
Pothole.
Threw a pothole ahead of him. That's such a bizarre image. What do you take a pothole out of one part of the road and then
press should be smooth sailing.
That's like something the Roadrunner does to Wile E. Coyote. Like, just take
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Wile E. Coyote paints a pothole, and then the Roadrunner like throws it, and then Wile E. Coyote actually falls into it.
Let's
Jesus, I remember I remember Mission Good, him getting on that boat, and like Chris Matthews basically saying, like, look at how well endowed he looks in that thing.
Yes. Well, wait a second.
We are such an embarrassing
I don't have
country.
I brought the doll up here.
Oh, you got the doll? I hope so.
I don't know where it is. I've got the Mission Accomplished doll that they literally.
I think this is going to resonate.
Here's Mike DeWine. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's worth viewing. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio. They are again in this state. They have set up a website to report not whether your employer is maintaining the standards put out by the Ohio Health Department and the CDC to protect workers and potentially, I guess, customers. But instead, there's a website set up where you can report workers who are too afraid to come in to work so that they are not eligible for unemployment insurance. And here's DeWine. I mean, I guess rainy day is just, it means a different thing in Ohio.
I want to outline briefly where these cuts will be made. And again, these are cuts that we'll be making for the next 2 months. We will reduce Medicaid spending by $210 million. K through 12 foundation payment reduction will be $300 million. Other education budget line items, $55 million. Higher education, $110 million. All other agencies, $100 million. And that totals up to $775 million.
Now, I like how he says we're just going to be cutting this. We're going to be cutting the numbers, but he's not saying we're going to be kicking off the Medicaid rolls. X number of thousands of people.
During a pandemic.
During a pandemic.
I mean, at any time obscene.
They have, what is it? 1.5. How much money do they have in their rainy day fund? I lost my
$2 billion.
$2 billion. $2.7 billion. Here it is. They have $2.7 billion in their rainy day fund, and they are cutting Medicaid education, and education. Saving $775 million, you could basically not make those cuts and still have $2 billion in your rainy day fund. Like, I don't know how much rain. It's not raining if all you're doing is kicking people who are living in poverty off of their health insurance, or you're simply making education for public school kids that much worse. It's not a rainy day. That's a sunny day. Mike DeWine's part of the country.
You talk about the psychological tolls of things these people like to selectively use when they're demanding we reopen the economy. I mean, it's innately, unbelievably dangerous, obviously, not to have health insurance. But I could tell you just even, I mean, when I turned 18 years old and I wasn't eligible for whatever the public program was in Massachusetts, that scared the hell out of me. And that's at a time in your life when, like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? It's not like still went and lived life, didn't think about it, but it just occurs to you like, oh, I'm going to go play basketball. If somebody comes down on my ankle, that might actually be a bigger problem than just like a bad couple of weeks. And you're doing that psychological burden during a freaking pandemic, while at the same time forcing a bunch of people who probably because of their jobs don't have health insurance back to work. I mean, that is murderous. It's the only word I could think of.
Calling from a 720 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
This is Marcus from Denver.
Marcus from Denver. What's on your mind?
Hey, Sam. I just wanted to see, did you see Cenk Uyghur's 5-year progressive takeover plan last night?
5-year a 5-year progressive takeover plan?
Yeah, it was interesting. If you didn't, that's okay. I have something else.
I didn't. Was it a show?
Yeah, it was just like a 2-hour-long special. And, well, I think he had a lot of people were shitting on Cenk last night because of one of his tweets. But
okay,
obviously, he always has good points. And it actually pertains to one of the races that's the Senate race in Colorado. So, okay, Andrew Romanoff, he's, a progressive, I think.
Yeah.
And he's running the Democratic primary. Obviously, Hickenlooper is too.
Yeah.
And obviously not a progressive. And there's still some other people running who, so the person I'm thinking about is Lorena Garcia, and she's awesome. And she's definitely a progressive, and I love her, and I really want to vote for her. But at the same time, we have Andrew Romanoff, who is, he supports Green New Deal, Medicare for All, and I think he probably falls into the Elizabeth Warren lane of politics.
Who's leading in the polls? I mean, I know Hickenlooper is, but who's leading in the polls between
Yeah, so we had a preference poll in the Colorado Assembly, and Romanoff won by 54%. So, Romanoff is probably going to win. So, but the thing is, I don't know. I'm hesitant to support him because if he gets to the Senate, I don't want him to screw us. I don't want him to be, somebody who supports Medicare for All and then, as soon as he gets elected, just pivots right. And
every politician that you support will disappoint you in some way. But I can guarantee you Hickenlooper will not. Hickenlooper will be exactly who he appears to be. I mean, I interviewed Romanoff. I think he's pretty good. I don't know what he's going to do when he gets to office, but without really knowing the details of any other candidates, I would say go with the progressive candidate who has the best chance of winning. They're going to be better than Hickenlooper. Are you going to get Medicare for all? I got news for you. It doesn't matter which senator you elect from Colorado in terms of Medicare for all happening.
Yeah.
If
I-
and certainly not going to get it with Joe Biden. But
Yeah.
if you have a president, whomever, who says, I'm pushing Medicare for all, there's no doubt in my mind that Romanoff would vote for it. I don't know how hard he would fight for it if there wasn't, leadership at the top, but I also can assure you that Hickenlooper will vote against it.
Yep. Well, and yeah, I agree with that completely. And the reason it ties into Cenk is because he was talking about like our revolution and how that fits into the picture. And our revolution is, working to get local people elected to the local office. So, it's like for the progressive movement, like so many people on Twitter are just saying primary Warren. And it's that.
Yeah, that is stupid.
That doesn't work.
I have absolutely no problem with primarying Warren, but none.
I mean, you can primary Warren, but I mean, I mean,
we can, but that's not how it works,
Okay, all right. Let's. I mean, I don't know. All right, it's a boring fight to get into, but I don't know what you think. What works in what way? I don't know what that means. Let me just make a bigger point here. I think people really missed the boat on both sides of this with some of the electoral focus. So on one hand, there are people on the left who are ready to jettison everything and not, in terms of an electoral standpoint, not as an example, say, vote to get Trump out of office, which you should do. And then on the other hand, I think, a singular focus on elections, clearly there's limits to that. And I don't think there's anything more important, to the extent it is possible right now, than trying to revitalize a labor movement. I don't know how that happens. I don't know what our role is in that, but that is infinitely structurally more important than these particular races, frankly.
Right.
And as far as
don't
challenging,
waste your energy on primarying Warren, who is
look, if a better candidate comes along, I have no problem. I have no problem with exacting a political toll, a political cost on Elizabeth Warren. That's my view. That can, whatever. We've never seen eye to eye on Warren. You've always been much more confident in her than I have, and I remain not confident. And I don't, again, I don't look at politics just in terms of like, I get she has I don't sort of care about her voting record. I think her primary contribution to politics in the last couple of years has been negative. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a blue state.
I think that's
it's a blue state. I know you think that. This is what I think. It's a blue state. It's going to remain in the hands of Democrats. If somebody better comes along, then
I mean, broadly
great.
speaking, I am okay with primarying all candidates, all of them.
So great.
But in terms of like,
Warren is somebody
that's
who
the if
Warren
that's
is somebody
the top
who
on your list.
Warren
The caller presented it as like the first thing, and I would say no, that would be very low on my list in terms of what the left should be doing.
The first thing to do
in this country,
the first thing is
if
how
there's a list of 100 things, I would say that would be 101st on my list in terms of like the left building power would be to primary Elizabeth Warren.
I think that the first thing, undoubtedly, is how do we concretely and tangibly support some rebuilding of the labor movement in this
Absolutely.
country. I don't think there's anything that comes.
And I think the best way to do that, and that was there was a piece by Zach Beaucamp, I think his name is, in Vox, where he made specifically that point, is that like how do you increase the power of labor? And the way you do it is you get the most progressive lawmakers you can get into office and have them marginally change the laws in such a way that make it easier for labor to constitute itself. I mean, it's quite easy how you do, like, card check, for instance. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And certainly.
But right now, I mean, even in this moment,
of the senators in the Senate right now, I would say there are probably like 10 that are guaranteed votes for card check, and Elizabeth Warren is one of them. And so, Like
I don't know about
that
all
is.
that. But can we
even
not
by
get
your
into the
own
weeds of
standards there.
a
That's-
debate? Well, look, but there's also, all right.
Appreciate.
I'll just leave it with this. There's also the notion that I think is very important, that if somebody, her primary performance and contribution to national political life in the last couple of years has been disastrous. If somebody wants to come along and say,
what was the disaster that Bernie Sanders lost?
I think her role in this primary was extremely unhelpful, Sam. And we can relitigate it, but I think that that's pretty obvious. I mean, you don't see that?
I don't think.
You think her role in this primary was helpful?
Helpful to what? Bernie Sanders?
Anything. Bernie Sanders, progressive politics, anything.
I don't think it was helpful.
Are you glad she ran?
Am I glad she ran?
Did she do
bummed
well?
She lost. I'm bummed Bernie lost. I would be much rather have Elizabeth Warren as the nominee than Joe Biden.
But that wasn't going to happen.
What do you mean it wasn't going to happen?
It wasn't going to happen.
She was up and then she blew it.
Look, we see the primary differently. And as a result of seeing the primary differently, I think that there's nothing wrong with if there is the right candidate. Like and people's focus in Massachusetts is to say, hey,
speaking,
you know what? Maybe you should pay a political cost for this. I have no problem for that.
The first thing that he mentioned as what leftists should do to gain power is to primary Elizabeth Warren. And I would say that is.
I don't think that's the first thing he said. The first thing he said? I thought he was talking about Andrew Romanoff. So.
Right. And then he said there are some leftists who want to primary Elizabeth Warren. And my point is that like to go, if that's the first thing that you as a leftist are doing, then you are ridiculous. I have no problem with primary in general. I think it's good to primary.
I'm going to say it could be within the top
literally 25 interviews on Ring of Fire of people primarying Democrats, some who are horrible, some who are okay. But
I think the idea of someone paying a political cost for political actions is great. And if somebody wants to do it, go for it. I would be very interested to see
the only political.
That's all I have to say.
The only political sin that she has committed that you've articulated is she ran in the primary.
Mm-hmm. She ran in the primary. She also demonized Bernie. She didn't endorse Bernie. I mean, there's any number of these things. For me, I think those things are a problem. But again, we looked at it differently. I thought it was a serious choice between those two. And I did not think they were electoral, and I didn't think they were electorally aligned either.
I'm from a 334 area code. Who's this? (334) Bye. Calling from a 354 area code. Who's this?
Hear me, Sam?
Yes.
Hey, this is Eagle calling from Iceland.
Who is it?
Ezekiel from Iceland.
Eagle calling from Iceland.
Eagle from Iceland. Welcome to the program, Eagle.
Thank you so much. Been a big fan of your show. I wanted to talk about well, kind of similar to what you and Michael were talking about, but I wanted to give my assessment of the U.S. politics today and what it is, from my point of view, what it has looked like in terms of power. From my point of view, I think that the Republicans, in terms of what Mark Blythe has called, are just a one-way. They're just on a one-way trajectory. Just maximize power for their business. For their business. What do you call it? The guys who are supporting them,
right?
We're just putting money in their coffers,
right?
I would call these. There are three factions of power, I think, in U.S. from my perspective. It's the Republicans, it's the establishment Democrats, who have the majority of the power, and maybe a tiny bit of power are what you would call maybe the progressives. And from my perspective, the Democratic establishment, I think, mostly represent the business elite, like the left lane of the business party, if you will. And I feel like just to be clear, if you're voting in a general election, vote for Biden, vote for the Democratic option, because you don't have another choice. So I don't make this to be anybody misunderstanding what I'm saying, but it should be pretty clear that the Democratic establishment, I feel, have been their primary, well, maybe not primary objective, but they want to occupy the left lane, and they want to define it for their own. They want to define it for themselves. They don't like it, I think, when guys like Bernie Sanders and AOC and people of that ilk come in and try to redefine it and like outflank them to their left.
Of course.
So I think yes, I mean, it's not very profound, but my point is they will go to extreme lengths, I think, to destroy their left flank. They don't, really see much of a loss to themselves, even though if they lose to Republicans. I think they want to win all elections, but they don't really feel like
what constitutes
much, even though
constitutes extreme lengths? Is it that they're okay with losing to Republicans?
No. I think they want to win all elections, including general elections. I don't think they're setting themselves up to try to lose elections. But I don't know. They don't see, just from viewing. Take for instance this crisis. The number of lost opportunities for the establishment faction of the party to just institute some kind of policies to bring relief to people. It's kind of amazing watching from Iceland, and it's like it's utterly insane.
Yeah,
like it's utterly crazy what has been going on. And also my view is as well is that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi bear a lot of responsibility. I feel like, given who the Republicans are, they're just going to go one way. They're going to maximize short-term profits for their donors, no matter what. So the question is, you're not going to argue with them, or you're not going to get them to change course. What you have to do is make them pay a political price.
Exactly.
And I think that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi have completely and utterly failed. And for that reason, I feel they bear a responsibility for the behavior of the Republicans, because they never hold them to account. Well, from my point of view, I never see them hold them to account.
I agree with exactly what you're saying, and the way that we used to articulate this, and this has been going on for as long as I've been watching politics in this way, and I appreciate the call, Eagle. That there are battles that are worth losing, and in this instance, like, you would have to believe that the Republican Party genuinely does not think that spending government money doesn't enhance economic activity. And of course, there's no one, at least in this administration, who believes that. There's a reason why Donald Trump wanted the Fed to loosen, to lower interest rates. That's fiscal. That's a financial spending. You can basically spend money one of two ways: one from a monetary standpoint, one from a fiscal standpoint. And they want it both ways. They want both, and they should, particularly in this instance. And so, if you know this, the Democrats supposedly got everything they wanted. Well, they didn't want enough, is the problem. They're afraid to go out on any type of limb and push for anything in that regard. And so there's missed opportunities in terms of the politics. There's missed opportunities. I think, even if you could argue that they couldn't get the legislative stuff that they want in there, they've missed the opportunity from a political standpoint.
It's also, I think that's 100% right. But I think it's also important to look at who in their caucus, has power. And we're still in a dynamic, I assume, where the more austerity oriented, corporate friendly folks are still generally the people that represent competitive districts. And that is part of the functional reason why they're listened to more than people with better politics and safe seats. So that dynamic needs to be thought about too.
Steve, these are all from Tuesday. Shoot. I am Kurla, and they are absolutely, I am from Kurla, and they're absolutely doing a great job. Kurla historically has a huge
What is
alcohol
Kerala?
problem.
Oh, Kerala.
Kerala
in India.
Kerala historically has a huge alcohol problem. Because of this, the government has decided to deliver alcohol to homes in order to avoid breaking social distancing due to addictions. This is unfathomable in America. It certainly is. King of all IMers. Sam, can I get a shout out for my new blog at don'treviewthisbook.com? It's going to be a safe space for folks to review the Dave Rubin book. The free market is kicking in. There you go. Beat the Reaper. Pandemic party time for sadistic sophistry.
What?
Melancholy. When they say there's no law guaranteeing life or health, they ignore the general welfare clause. It means the whole purpose of the Constitution and government is to provide for our general welfare. That's why it's not in the Bill of Rights. I'm down with that. Jonathan Armstead. If you want to see a great documentary on the 2002 attempted coup in Venezuela, check out The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Filmmakers were there to film Chavez doing his nightly televised address and instead got some fantastic footage of the coup attempt.
That's
It ends with a great
story.
denial from Colin Powell.
That's an incredible.
Desperate Koala. A bunch of celebs are going to team up to read Harry Potter from lockdown, including Dan Radcliffe and Stephen Fry. So more evidence that wealth doesn't make you insane. Top 2 buttons undone is a good look, Sam. Michael, keep up the beard. You look a little doughy, clean shaven. Okay, have fun. Frank, what would you say to some millennials who don't support free college because they had to pay off their loans? I've heard this quite a few times. I would just simply say, like, that's absurd. Would you not want Medicare for all? Because is it fair to the 50-year-olds to give Medicare for all to a 30-year-old when I've had to live the past 20 years paying for my own health insurance? I mean, that doesn't make sense. Is it fair? Is it fair to increase Social Security benefits for anybody, turning 65 in 5 years or 10 years when we've had generations of Americans who've gone through at less Social Security benefits? I mean, we do this all the time. I mean, is it fair that there's tax cuts?
You'll get more economic benefits out of it too. I mean, I have to assume that if you're talking to somebody who really genuinely thinks that, they might not be moved by these other examples because, some of the same kind of disingenuous selfishness would apply. But if you unlocked that level, like, there would be a very positive economic consequence from that. So if you're hey man, you paid off your loans so you could start a business or have a medical practice or whatever it is you do, you're going to generate a lot of economic activity if you get people from under the burden of their loans. It's generic, but anytime I've talked to somebody who really does have that kind of narcissistic policy set, the only thing that you could maybe get a crack in is home ownership will go up, people will create new businesses, there will be more jobs.
Oh, yeah. There's clearly societal benefits. I wonder if those people would have a problem with a vaccination that comes out for COVID-19 after people have died. That's not fair.
That's different.
That's not
That's
fair
the response. That's different.
Quinn from Indianapolis. Sam, can I get a happy birthday shofar? Yes, you can. Cosmore Myers, you guys ever talk to the citations needed guys? I'm not even sure I know what that means. Cuomo's nipple piercing. Oh, that reminds me.
Jesus.
So
speaking of Mike DeWine,
we just had Diane Ravitch on the other day on this program. We had pre-taped it prior to the lockdown. And she was recounting the death of corporate education reform movement. Largely, it's not totally gone. One of the big drivers of this movement was hundreds of millions of dollars that the Gates Foundation spent on experiments with schools in the Pacific Northwest. Not many. But I should also say that they also give a tremendous amount of other money to schools on other projects, but specifically like the value add, all the high stake testing. This was largely driven by a billionaire saying, this is where I'm putting my money, and then money following after it. This is a dynamic that you see it in the stock market. People follow Buffett. I'm going to, whatever Buffett's going to do, or somebody's going into this business. When somebody comes in, when an entity comes in and pours money into a certain sector, more money follows it. And which is one of the biggest problems with the giving of money by billionaires in this way, in that they have outsized influence over public policy without knowing crap all about what they're doing. In fact, here is evidence of that. In June of 2018, the Gates Foundation hired the Rand Corp to assess the efficacy of that investment in education over the course of 10 years. The report came out. It was 526 pages long. It was entitled Improving Teacher Effectiveness Final Report. Here it is. Overall, the initiative did not achieve its stated goal for students, particularly low-income minority students. By the end of 2014-2015, student outcomes were not dramatically better than outcomes in similar sites that did not participate in the Intensive Partnership Initiative. That was the name of their program. Furthermore, in sites where these analyses could be conducted, we did not find improvement in the effectiveness of newly hired teachers relative to experienced teachers. We found very few instances of improvement in the effectiveness of teacher force overall. We found no evidence that LIM students, LIM, low income or minority students, had greater access than non-LIM students to effective teaching. And we found no increase in the retention of effective teachers, although we did find declines in the retention of ineffective teachers in most sites. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Why didn't it work? Unfortunately, the evaluation cannot identify the reasons the IP initiative did not achieve its student outcome goals. It is possible the reforms are working, but we failed to detect their effects because of insufficient time has passed. It's also possible that other schools in the same states we use for comparison purposes adopted similar reforms, limiting our ability to detect effects. However, the findings of no effect are valid. The results might reflect the lack of successful models on which sites could draw in implementing the levers, problems in making, et cetera, et cetera. And they go on to basically say, we should have listened to educators. That was the result of the assessment that the Gates Foundation did about their own education project. You know who apparently did not read that report? Bill Gates did not read that report, or I can definitely say with assuredness, Andrew Cuomo did not read that report.
If you look at the technology, it looks like all these different students are in one classroom. All right. Well, let's learn from that, and let's learn from this experience. We did a lot of remote learning. Frankly, we weren't prepared to do it. We didn't have advanced warning. But we did what we had to do, and the teachers and the education system did a great job. But there's more we can do. We're still working on providing some students with the technology, with the tablets, et cetera. Some teachers needed training and they weren't ready for it. Well, let's take this experience and really learn how we can do differently and better with our education system in terms of technology and virtual education, et cetera. And that's something we're actively working on through this process. So it's not about just reopening schools. when we are reopening schools, let's open a better school and let's open a smarter education system. And I want to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We'll be working with them on this project.
Yes.
Bill Gates is a visionary in many ways.
All right,
and,
I don't need to hear any
his
more positive.
ideas-
Please, enough with
Listen, the card that they had up there, put the card back up because I just want to see it frozen. It was Reimagine Education. The state will work with the Gates Foundation to convene experts and develop a blueprint to reimagine education in the new normal. Look, I think it's perfectly legit. Now you can get rid. Now, I think it's perfectly legitimate to say, let's reimagine technology. But if you're talking about education, you start with the educators and you ask them, based upon your experience, if you have the ability and the necessity to teach from a distance and the ability to have any technology you would want, what would you want it to do? What's the best way for kids to learn in this context? Not the technology is supposed to serve the educators. The educators are not there to serve the technology. And again, we're walking down this same path by letting someone who makes assessment about education in a fundamentally incorrect way, so that it basically derailed education in this country for over a decade. Well over a decade.
2 points to add to that. Rob Larson talked about on this show with me a couple of weeks ago. It's very important that Bill Gates is in the philanthropy game, at least initially, to counteract the disastrous PR that he had in the late 90s because of antitrust and other issues with Microsoft. And that if you look at, the role that philanthropy often plays with these folks is that it serves a great dual purpose because it gives them good PR, but then it also forwards their overall ideological project, which could be as broad as treat public schools like a business and trust billionaires more than educators. And the second point, more concretely, I just talked with Medina Touré, who covers education in New York City for Politico. And, the point being that none of this stuff occurs in a vacuum. So even before we even get to the necessity of basing it off of what educators say they need, if you look at the reality of the class dimensions of, even if you get everybody that needs a laptop, which isn't happening necessarily anyways, the social difference between somebody sitting in a nice, well-furnished apartment who's comfortable and fluent with technology and has quiet versus a one-bedroom where you're sharing it with your parents, maybe some cousins, maybe a sibling, there's different age groups, there's multiple different things going on. You can't focus at all in the same way on the same curriculum. And the point being that that's the part where you have to go back to the fact that Andrew Cuomo is cutting social services. He's cutting the social safety net right now. And the bigger context of education, particularly if you want to push it out into people's homes and out of an actual classroom, it's only going to get more implicated by disparities in health and economics.
Every one of the professional educators that we have had on this program, theorizers for over 10 years, have all agreed with the sentiment that I can tell you what education outcomes are based upon the 5-digit zip code in which those people are coming from.
Right.
And the same challenges that exist for education when people come to schools is the same challenges that exist for education fundamentally when they can't come to schools. And that is, how are they situated at home? What kind of nutrition, what kind of experience are they getting at home? These are all social ills that come into education. You can build the greatest platform you want, but as Michael was saying, if there is, if the situation at home is effed up, it's not going to make a damn difference.
Well, and it's going to be even worse. I mean, what some of her reporting is talking to, because you're taking away the one with all of the inbuilt flaws and inequities, still an actual physical space that represents meals, that represents theoretically a classroom that is open to all and everybody's being attended to. When you kick that all into the home, you're getting rid of even that one layer of social and nutritional protection.
And on top of it, in this context that we're at least living in, I don't know what the future is going to look like in terms of this reimagining education that Cuomo anticipates, but the vast majority of people who are working in these, necessary jobs are low income. And that means that the kids are probably not getting any type of like one-to-one attention at home. And so the idea that you start with Bill Gates is so transparently about Andrew Cuomo looking for a benefactor for his future political aspirations that it is, I want to say shocking, but it's shocking.
It's actually, well,
enraging
and absolutely expected. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, hoofa.
Going to the IM's Sam's CBD pill before bed. It's a tincture. Guys, can you please explain how a society where private property is abolished would function? Like, if I want to go get a new TV, how would that work? Well, I don't think that private property should be abolished. So you'll still be able to go get your TV.
I think people really need to distinguish between markets and capitalism. They're not the same thing, and scales of private property. So one example, which, I mean, in your TV example, you can go and just get yourself a TV. But I think it's a very interesting, there was a proposal coming out of the UK on reforming land laws there, because that's a major part of wealth concentration, particularly there. And saying like, you should be able to own your own house, but you be able to literally own the land underneath the house?
Right.
I would say no. That's a public commons. So I think it's much more interested in terms of making really useful distinctions between public, private, and social than thinking of like how we can adjudicate the most banal interactions in a utopia that will never happen. Not to sound too harsh, but if that makes sense. Like,
Matt, are you trying to talk?
No, he was out.
Colin
but
Bull.
Yeah.
If the aliens shooting their laser beam would save the economy, Republicans would be all for it. It's got to happen. Some people are going to get fried, but Dolink, Greg Abbott knows medicine. He is a medical malpractice defense attorney. As a nurse paralegal, I used to sit next to him in conferences about cases. He masquerades as a Christian, as do many for political purposes. Also, the audio on the app is still not working. Kyle says he's working on it. Ooh, I didn't know that. Sorry about that, guys. Marianne Williamson's crystal ball. When you guys talk over each other, it's not only obnoxious, but it ruins the show. Okay.
I just wanted to say, can you hear me now?
Balance the mics. Michael is way too loud.
Can you hear Matt?
A TV is personal property anyway. Private property is basically like investments you use to, as far as I understand, Michael, maybe correct me, but it's something you use to make more money in capital, right? Like personal property, a TV, that's not even, you can still be able to buy a TV, but it'd be from like a state-run store.
That's a better way of saying like or maybe even a small electronics store.
Maybe, yeah. I'm less concerned about that.
I think the point is that one is you take on the commanding heights of the economy, which are like the major scaled industries, and you say they either need to be some type of democratized, worker cooperative, or maybe they need to be genuinely multi-stakeholder with labor. Those are where the areas are much more. And I think the distinction you're pointing at is like the home versus property distinction.
Yeah.
Like you owning your own personal thing and having that privacy and ownership. I'm certainly not interested in stripping that away from you. That does sound like a totalizing utopian kind of fantasy.
It's more about your mill than about your clothes.
Right.
Xbox.
Balance the mics. Michael is way too loud. Joyce from PA. I remember Michael saying Elizabeth Warren is irrelevant in the primary. So why all the anger toward her?
She was unhelpful. That's where my anger is coming from. I don't remember when I said she was irrelevant, but
I was better at sports than you growing up. Please argue more about Warren. Very entertaining for me. D Max.
I love the range.
MJ. Warren's
of
run was
responses.
destructive and intended to be so. Mike gets a little swole with the pseudo edu babble, but as Maddow's long wordy bro, he's right. He just uses too many words to be right.
What?
Warren's
I find that
existence-
analysis disquieting.
Warren's continued existence as what the party loves to present as its left, as she repeatedly undermines it, puts her top 5 things to go at. And when
Yeah,
Mike
I like
says
that.
that's all I'm going to say, don't believe it.
That's true.
MR Sunshine, Citations Needed is a great podcast, debunking of MSM tropes. Wait, is that, who is
Oh, that's
that?
Nima Shirazi's podcast.
Adam Johnston too, I think.
Mic balancing has to come from each individual Zoom account. So what does that mean? That I need to
Maybe
up
it's
my...
something we can talk about after the show, but it's in preferences. You can adjust your own mic.
I don't know. People might like if we hash it out now.
Yeah. So if you go to here, I'll show the screen.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well, mine is.
I was kind of joking.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, we can't mix the audio now, right?
But look, if people want that really nice mixed audio, just check the podcast, folks. I'm running it through all the best filters, so it'll be nice and smooth. Oh, the best.
Tony from Toronto. The idea that you oppose loan relief after paying off loans is ridiculous because that dynamic exists for any improvement. Any improvement necessitates that someone had it worse off before. Exactly.
I oppose all road paving. Anytime I've driven over a pothole.
Lena. Sam, could you have on a guest to discuss labor organizing? One thing I find confusing is trying to find the right bargaining unit for a workplace, and if some new trades like IT might benefit from a craft style guild. I don't know if we got into that with
Jane McAlevey.
Jay McAlevey, but we may have. Congressional baseball fan. While we're under this yellow flag, I hate to slide in during the bottom of the ninth to upset the apple cart in the middle of the tsunami after the earthquake. But there was some important Big Apple news last week. 10 previously thought extinct varieties. Oh, Big Apple news. Okay. 10 previously thought extinct varieties have been rediscovered by apple hunters in Washington and Idaho. The varieties include the Sari Sinap from Turkey, Streak Pippin from 1744 New York.
Wow.
Oh, I think I read about that Streak Pippin, and the Buttersweet from Pennsylvania. Thoughts? I'm interested in it. I'm interested in the Pippin. I'll do that. Putting some wine sap in very shortly, actually. Oh, speaking of, I don't think 1744, but I think we're going to go back in history in some fashion. Here is Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends with Jack Kemp. What?
No, Jack Kemp passed away.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's what the history part is. Who is he on with?
I forget. This guy's a general, Jack something or another. It's some Jack Irish name. I forget.
Okay.
Some Jack.
It's General Jack.
You can look it up. He's on Fox all the time.
Okay.
Oh, Brian.
Well, so Kilmeade has brought in a one of the Fox generals to say, what are we going to do? Can't we get some? Can't we get something going on here now? I mean, we're just sitting around doing nothing. Maybe it's time for an invasion.
I'll get back to work.
As long as Maduro stays, China, Cuba, and Russia have a stake in our hemisphere, which is a direct violation of the Monroe Doctrine. Something's got to give here.
I would say that Cuba does have a stake in this hemisphere.
Cuba probably does.
Yeah.
Are they? Are China and Russia signatories to the Monroe Doctrine?
No, apparently they haven't been educated on their role in helping maintain the U.S. sphere of imperial influence. Yeah,
I think Fox should send Kilmeade over and to educate them about the.
Yeah, I would like to. I will. Yes, I will go fund me.
Hey,
Let's fly.
maybe what he can do while he's over there is visit one of the, I don't know, 700 bases that surround both those countries. It's a violation of the Monroe Doctrine.
Look.
Oh my God. We've reconvened the Security Council for purposes of a violation of the Monroe Doctrine. And what about the Trump Doctrine too? Like, I got to get a taste. That's the Trump Doctrine. I got to get a taste. I'm going to need a taste. So you're doing any of this? I'm going to need a taste.
In the sitcom version, it's like, the Chinese security go like, sorry, we will not give Venezuela loans. We had no idea.
You get the sense
this is your zone of influence? What?
Kilmeade's taking this time at home to read through his Encyclopedia Britannicus that he has.
No, he might just be reading his own books.
The thing, though, that I like about Brian is I think if he did take that trip, he would come home with a very different perspective. That would change again in a couple of weeks. But all of a sudden, there'd be a couple of weeks where he'd be like, why can't we have a multipolar world? You know?
Here is Sean Hannity and Fox and Friends really backing off one of the principles, it seems to me, of the Second Amendment. Like, I never thought I would see the day where these people would attack people who are just supporting their right to carry long arms and get all buffed up in Kevlar to go to a protest about something that has nothing to do with guns. This is really rhinos. Let's see these guys.
As we've been talking about the states reopening in some parts of the country, and some are at stage 1 and some are at stage 2, some of the most restrictive stay-at-home orders have been in the state of Michigan. And last week we heard from Governor Whitmer.
Is there anybody else who's worried about Kilmeade? Because every clip that we play of Brian Kilmeade, he looks like he's like, I don't know, like the seat that he's sitting on is uncomfortable, or maybe it's like super hot where he is. Like, he just
doesn't he always look like that?
He seems like under duress, and I don't know what's going on.
Doesn't he always seem like that though?
Maybe he's just mad because it really does feel like Ducey is like taking over the show.
Kilmeade always looks extremely touchy to me. Very irritable.
Let's play.
And she said at one of those protests, she said there were swastikas and Confederate flags and nooses and people with assault rifles. That's what she said. Well, Sean Hannity has been talking on his program about how he completely, as we all do, support people's First Amendment rights. But then again, when people go to a protest with a big gun like that, it puts our police in danger and so much more. Here's Sean Hannity from Monday night. Listen to this.
No one is a bigger defender of the Second Amendment than yours truly. Everyone has the right to protest, protect themselves, and try to get the country open. This, with the militia look here and these long guns, no. Show of force is dangerous. That puts our police at risk. And by the way, your message will never be heard, whoever you people are. No one should be attempting to intimidate officials with a show of force. And God forbid something that happens, then they're going to go after all of us law-abiding Second Amendment people.
You know, Brian, I think the average person watching the protests in Michigan is going, you know, I support the people's rights to assemble and to protest and to carry guns. But at the same time, why did they have to bring the big gun to that particular protest? So Sean's got a point, many feel. What do you think? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. All right, Brian.
Yeah, no question. He's got to feel if you're going to show up with a Confederate flag or swastikas. I didn't see any of that video, but it just squelches your message. Socially distance, show up and let your voices be heard. You had a great case in Michigan. That's been a very aggressive governor that's supplanting and ignoring state legislature and her citizens in trying to be so-called safe. Meanwhile, it's
You know what I find fascinating
So-called safe.
about this?
Wow.
You know what I find fascinating about this, and aside from the fact that Hannity, who just talked about the guns, not the swastikas and whatnot, but all of them, you don't want to show up with the swastikas and the Confederate flags and the guns because that hurts your message. What about just taking a moment and saying, hey, who are these people that would show up with swastikas and guns and Confederate flags? Like, it's not like, hey, what should we bring to the protest? All I've got lying around is this swastika flag. Well, I wish we had a flag that said open up, but as long as it's a flag, you might as well just
Flag's a flag. So, but wait, the only reason that they're doing this, though, right, is because if Obama was president, they would ignore the SWAT. They would say the swastikas and the Confederate flags are fake news, or the swastikas are fake news. Confederate flags are states' rights. And then they would defend people showing up with this type of artillery.
People showed up at the anti-healthcare, at the anti-Obamacare rallies with guns.
With guns.
Constantly.
They already did this. So they're doing this because it must be that we don't want things to look too crazy for Trump's reelection, and we don't want things to look out of control. So your message, so what they're doing and why they're doing it so gingerly is they're actually messaging to the people who watch their channel who are going to these things and saying, hey guys, don't be a lunatic.
Hey, white supremacists.
Yes.
Hey, neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
Winky, winky. Like, they're not saying like, hey,
squelch
the
message.
They're not saying, they could also say like, look, there were a lot of just, typical Americans there who don't subscribe to Nazism, who don't believe in the Confederacy, and don't want to intimidate people with guns, and they just got overrun. So those people who are they're being the media is just focusing on them. Instead, they're saying like, look, we realize that everybody who goes to these rallies, for the most part, the majority of them, are neo-Nazis or Confederate lovers or gun-toting, freaks who, they're amosexuals. And this is the way that they're going to get off, by wearing their Kevlar vests. But you guys got to tone it down. You just got to just look like you're normal. Pretend. It doesn't even occur to them why these things are full of people like this. Unbelievable. I guess when you're on Fox you never have to pay attention to those things. All right. Lastly, we mentioned earlier, the Wisconsin, there was a big win for the, I guess, progressives, the left, whatever you want to call it, in the last election in Wisconsin for the state Supreme Court. Republicans or conservatives still dominate this court. I know it's nonpartisan, but give me a break. The guy who had recused himself in the question of the purging of like hundreds of thousands of voters, last time he lost the election, he's going to hear it again and not recuse himself because Wisconsin, because Republicans. Here is a Republican Supreme Court justice, Wisconsin Supreme Court justice, talking about the stay-at-home orders. Now, apparently, what's interesting that's happening in Wisconsin is that Democratic-leaning Board of Electorates, because they have the opportunity to call for a safe election by ballots, are doing so. And so there's a fascinating dynamic that's happening where these Republicans are saying, we don't want to do this. All right, don't do it. Good luck with your voters coming out in heavily Republican districts. But here is the state Supreme Court talking about how oppressive it is to have people stay at home during a pandemic, not because the government's not providing economic benefits to them to make up, but rather it's an encroachment on their freedom.
Counsel, because one of the rationales that we're hearing justifying the secretary's order in this case is that, well, it's a pandemic and there isn't enough time to promulgate a rule and have the legislature involved with determining the details of the scope of the secretary's authority. I'll direct your attention to another time in history, in the Korematsu decision, where the court said the need for action was great and time was short. And that justified, and I'm quoting, assembling together and placing under guard all those of Japanese ancestry in assembly centers during World War II. Could the secretary, under this broad delegation of legislative power or legislative-like power, order people out of their homes into centers where they are properly socially distanced in order to combat the pandemic?
Your Honor, Korematsu was an equal protection challenge to the action that the government took to address the crisis. This is not a substantive constitutional challenge to what DHS has done. This is
my question goes to the scope again of the secretary's authority and what the limits are. What I'm hearing is, well, the legislature doesn't need to specify the limits. It's a time of pandemic. There isn't enough time to go through rulemaking. So the secretary just has to do whatever she alone deems necessary to combat the pandemic. So my question to you, in invoking Korematsu, is not the bases for the claims that were brought in that case versus this case. The point of my question is, what are the limits, constitutional or statutory? There have to be some, don't there, counsel?
Yes, there absolutely are, Your Honor. Justice Bradley, I think if you read the petition for an original action that was filed with your court just last evening, there are a variety of fundamental rights-based claims that target different pieces of Executive Order 28 on the basis of the freedom of religion, the freedom to travel, and I don't know all what's in there. It's a long petition, but there's a lot of constitutional rights in it. That is one of the fundamental backstops against an unreasonable and unconstitutional exercise of power by DHS.
All right, let me just tease out what is being argued here. She is citing Korematsu, which is the Supreme Court case that allowed for people to be put into internment camps without any type of legislative action. And she's saying, like, could, that was a problem. Could I don't know what the position is in Wisconsin. Could the health inspector, the chief health inspector there, say, we're going to quarantine people here? And the lawyer is saying, well, look, we made it quite clear that the limiting principle is based upon the constitutional rights that people have. And those constitutional rights, there is a huge body of law that says that you cannot abridge these rights without some type of compelling state interest that is consistent with the authority that's doing it. The health inspector cannot say people are going to go into internment camps because we're afraid that they're spies. Could the health inspector say that we need to quarantine people because they have Ebola? I think the answer is yes. I don't think there's any obligation for the health inspector to say, we're going to need legislation on this with these Ebola people. We can't quarantine them. I have no authority to do. Of course, there's authority here. It is completely consistent with the role of the state health inspector to issue something based upon health. And then I guess you could question, like, people could petition and say, like, there's no health issue here. And then the court could resolve, like, there's no health issue here. I mean, it's just, these people are lunatics, and it is unbelievable how cohesive their lunacy is across the board. State Supreme Court, and now look, this is the same state Supreme Court that said that Evers did not have the ability to push the election in a pandemic. The same court that was then backed up by the U.S. Supreme Court that we're going to discount any absentee ballots that come in after the election day.
Which is a substantive violation. I mean, what strikes me, you outlined that perfectly in terms of just the insane disanalogy there, but that this stuff always runs in tandem. I don't know where the Bill Barr requests are right now for essentially doing away with habeas corpus. I don't know where that stands. We do know that the Wisconsin Supreme Court, as you said, basically just, essentially mandated that, hey, if you want to vote or exercise your franchise, you have to put your life in danger, and we're not going to do anything to mitigate that. So it isn't even, and of course, we're not going to do anything on policing issues or anything else. the parallel of we will use the most extreme rhetoric, we will use the most insane, ludicrous historical comparisons to try to not do anything to mitigate a pandemic, and then that will go along this other track of us actually relentlessly undermining substantive civil liberties and voting rights across the board.
All right. Let's see. All right.
I thought Michelle Malkin explained that internment was good, though. They gotta work on their talking points.
One more quick phone call. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, John? John, will you back off your phone just a little bit?
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So
Okay,
next
now
Tuesday,
back off your
there's...
phone just a little bit. Sorry.
Okay. So next Tuesday, there's a primary in Nebraska in the 2nd House District. A brand new Congress endorsed Kara Eastman, who you interviewed for Ring of Fire on October 18th. And she upset House member Brad Ashford in 2018, the Democratic primary. And then in general, she only lost by 2 points. So that's supposed to be a super tight race. And if she wins the primary, which she very likely will, she has a good chance of winning in the general. So that should be a race we'll be looking out for. Also, Aaron Kowalski's race. We'll be
Yes,
looking
sir.
for that in the Republican primary.
Kowalski in Nebraska.
Yeah, so also on the 19th, Oregon will hold its primary. And so in the 5th District, brand new Congress endorsed Mark Gamba. He's a primary, and Kurt Schrader, who has the most conservative voting record of all 4 sitting Democrats in Oregon. And in the 4th District, another brand new Congress, a candidate, Doyle Canning, is primarying Peter DeFazio. In the 3rd District, let's see what brand new Congress.
So, John, is that
Albert
person
Lee,
to the
who
left
you
of
interviewed
DeFazio? DeFazio is pretty progressive now.
Yeah, DeFazio's good, but I mean, Doyle Canning is even better. I mean,
Oh, okay, cool.
She's right down the line.
Okay.
Yeah, all the things I think that most of us believe in.
Sounds good.
Yeah, in the 3rd District, you interviewed Albert Lee on October 4th, and he's primarying Earl Blumenauer, who also is pretty good. But I mean, I think Lee's better. This is kind of.
But Blumenauer's bad on
trade.
trade, I think. So that might be a good distinction.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the 1st District, also Amanda Seaby is running against Susanna Bonamucci. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And again, a good voting record for Bonamucci, but always want to try to get somebody better in. So I just want to kind of say about living in a red state, and just I mean there's a lot of anxiety, with everything opening up. And I mean, I'm pretty much in full quarantine, but I mean, I have to, go shopping. And so, I guess, I took my mother out of her nursing home, on the first day that we couldn't visit them. And I wrote a pretty long thread about the company.
Disgusting.
That she was in. I'm really happy that I took her out with, seeing a lot of places,
right.
Quarter of the people in the whole state are dying in nursing homes. And I kind of saw that was going to happen, just thinking about it, where's it going to happen where people gather. And so just real happy that she's here, and, hopefully we're going to be okay here. But I mean, it just really increases the anxiety, and
of course,
it's just totally insane what they're doing. And so, so it also just thinking about, the 6 states, the 6 top swing states, they do have the no excuse voting, the mail-in voting. I mean, hopefully we're going to get some funding to make sure that we're not going to have the same situation like in Wisconsin, to where all the votes are going to be. I mean, you're going to have so much more money. The Brennan Center has written about this to actually mail out all these mail-in ballots across the country, But I mean, it is good to know that the top 6 states, have no excuse voting.
Yeah.
Now in Texas, it's not that way though. I mean, right now, I'm not sure if you've read anything about it, but if you're over 65, you can vote by mail. But right now, there's been a lot of lawsuits coming down. The first case was won by the Democratic Party, who filed in both state and federal court on April 17th. Travis County Judge Tim Sulak said that you could vote for mail because of the coronavirus. That it is a legitimate threat. But I mean, the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, he's fighting this all the way, and they're saying we got to go by the book, and that's not the way that. You have to have a previous disability, and he's saying that he's insisting that the code language requires a pre-existing disability and the likelihood of injury to health. And he's not saying the fact that you could possibly get coronavirus, that's not a possibility of an injury to health. It's insane. And he's also saying that Sulak, he appealed this, but he's saying that Sulak's ruling is not valid, and that's totally not true. And he's making threats against these county judges who are expanding vote by mail by saying that they're, if they do that and they expand it, he's saying that he's threatening to arrest them for committing voter fraud. I mean, he put out a letter on Friday that was just totally insane.
All right. Well, John.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm glad your mom is safe. I'm glad you're safe. Hang in there. I know this is a stressful time, and just be safe when you go out. Obviously, wear your mask. It helps, even if it's not an N95 one, and keep your distance. And also, and I only offer this advice because I know that there's no downside to it, but vitamin D. I've seen some research that suggests that that people with high levels of or appropriate levels of vitamin D tend to have less serious, the COVID has less impact on them. Now, there's a myriad of reasons why that could be. It could just be like people who stay inside more and have less vitamin D have more, who knows? But so take vitamin D just because it can't hurt you.
Oh yeah, she takes it once a week. My mom takes it once a week. And
vitamin D?
Right.
Just take it on a daily basis.
Well, I mean, that's what the doctor said, once a week. But,
all right.
I mean,
all right.
Okay.
Hang in there, John.
What does he know?
All right.
Screw the doctor.
Well, I wasn't talking about her. I was talking about him.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that. I noticed that move.
All right.
The thread that he wrote on his mother's nursing home care a couple of months ago was appalling.
I got 10 more IMs and then we'll get out of here. Brianni, sounds good to me. Okay. Thank you. Richard Oakes, I oppose all medical improvements. Think of all the people that had polio and died of plague. Is it really fair to them? Bang Bart, I understand your frustration with Pelosi, but your frustrations are misplaced because you keep thinking of Pelosi as a political obstacle and not a political enemy. A political obstacle can be navigated and persuaded. An enemy can only be defeated. As an anti-capitalist, I'm glad that Nancy Pelosi shows off her $15,000 refrigerator. Pelosi is an enemy to be defeated, not someone we should hope learns from how to pander to the common folk. Well, I don't think she's going to learn new things, but, you know, in the meantime, I get what you're saying long term, but we have some immediate issues that need to be resolved. And I also think that, like, criticizing Pelosi maybe inhibits, and my understanding is that there's, like, you're starting to hear calls for this, her to serve one more term as a Speaker of the House, as it were, the leader of the Democrats, and to also say that the pushback she got on that freezer thing, at the very least, made her have to come out after that and sort of like get a little bit more responsive. Whether she's come through or not, I don't know. But look, I had Shahid Buttar on the Ring of Fire as well, but I can chew gum and walk at the same time. Sasha B. Bernie's back on the ballot in New York State. Yes, my understanding is that is the correct. Now, I know there's a court, there's an attempt to file a court case against it, but yes, the New York State Democratic presidential primary is back on. Taylor.
Make sure you vote for Isaiah James.
Michael's hair is getting messy. Time to buzz it off. He has the head shape for it. John McCain's ghost. Has it been brought to my attention that there's someone claiming to be me in the Twitch chat community? Now hear this. I am the original and the end of the beginning, the alpha and the omega. Oh. Quam. Nomiki and you guys say we have to keep pressure on to take over the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic Party is going to let themselves be taken over by the never Trumper wing of the Republican Party. Bill Kristol and Joe Walsh are already throwing support and influence. They seem to have more in common. Thoughts? I mean, I think there's a danger, I think there's a danger, but I don't know that those two guys are the problem. But broadly speaking, I think that
I think I've been very clear that I don't think the Democratic Party has moved to the left in any substantive or serious way. And I also think that you got to deal with the fact that the strategy with the Democratic Party in the main has not been working. And I definitely think that the never Trumpers have more influence, if you want to put it that way. And there isn't an infrastructure in this country for third parties. And, getting 2% doesn't do anything. So I'm not saying like it's a quandary. I think there's no easy answers for anybody. But both of those things, I hear some people say, hey, we just got to keep doing the same thing, roughly speaking. And I think obviously we need to rethink some strategy. But then I hear other people say that it can never be the Democratic Party. And the answer is another sort of purposeless, kind of random third party thing, which won't amount to anything, which, obviously I don't see any purpose in either. So.
Joker mode. Matt Stoller is foaming at the mouth to get into a Hawley administration. Jersey Max.
Yes.
Hey, Sam, I just wanted to say yesterday I heard some guy saying he lost his job but was going to keep his membership. Well, I decided to become a member to cover him. I've been pretty lucky during this as far as working from home and an ability to contribute. Anyway, glad to join up and appreciate it and good work. Thank you. Cool. Appreciate it. Also, I subscribe to Michael. You guys are a huge help to get through the workday as I sit at a desk. Thanks. Hey, Sam, just wanted to, oh yeah, okay, good. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. H-Dub. Final IM of the day. What the hell is wrong with the chat today? You're all being so mean to the boys. Jesus. All right, folks. See you.
Be nice to us.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in.